Honeywood Winery is the oldest continuous running winery in Oregon.
After Prohibition in 1934, a couple of pioneering spirits from Portland started Honeywood, John Wood and Ronald J. Honeyman.
That was the beginning of the current incredible Oregon wine industry.
In fact, one of their biggest sellers back then was currant wine.
A different kind of currant.
It was a different kind of currant.
But you know, you couldn't buy wine at a winery then. You had to buy it in a store. That was the only way that it was legal.
It wasn't easy to run a distillery after Prohibition. It was necessary for Honeywood to have a full-time government man on the premises every day.
And Honeywood did very well for a while.
In 1942, they needed more help and interviewed a young woman named Mary Reinke for a job as a secretary.
She was a real go-getter, and when they didn't call her back for the interview, she called them. Before long, she was their office manager.
Unfortunately, the business fell on some hard times, and then one of the founders passed away, and the other decided that he'd have to close down.
But Mary Reinke bought them out and put the pedal to the metal. Honeywood Winery really began to turn around, and before long, she was selling wine all over America.
In 1972, Honeywood was a thriving business, and Mary sold it to Paul Gallick and his partners. And then in 1990, they moved from the old warehouse to their new permanent location in Salem.
But long before that, she went to the legislature and lobbied to get wine tasting rooms legalized in Oregon, and on-property retail sales legalized as well.
Paul is still running things.
And Marlene is a wonderfully versatile winemaker.
Let's go see him.
Nice to see you, Bo.
Hi, Paul.
Good to see you again, Paul.
Good to meet you. You bet.
How are you?
Pretty good.
It's really nice to be here.
Honeywood,
Yes.
the oldest in the state. You've been operating, well, you've been here since when?
72.
And you bought the place from Mary Reinke.
From Mary Reinke. She had it during the 60s and part of the 50s.
She was pretty amazing.
Quite a gal. Well, you met her.
Yes.
And she's really one heck of a gal, way ahead of her time as a businesswoman and a leader in the community. And she did a lot of marvelous things for the wine industry.
I had a great talk with her a while back, right over there.
Once Prohibition was over, then they came up with ideas to produce the alcohol. And of course, Honeywood was producing fruit and berry alcohol. We call them spirits in those days. And I happened to be joining Honeywood at the time that we were producing the brandies. And they were like 100-proof brandies. You can't believe it. In fact, I still have some at home that from many years ago. You're looking at, it'll be about 1940 that I kept them from the winery here, and they taste wonderful now. They're about 40 years old, 50 years old. Isn't that something?
That's
it's remarkable. But we started, but it wasn't as lucrative as we thought it would be. So then they decided to go in the fruit and berry wines. Because this valley was known for the production, of the finest quality, so they decided to go into it. And of course, when I took it over, which was in the early 60s, then I wanted to enlarge on it by, showing ways that you could utilize the wines in cooking and mixing them up and drinks that are, people would enjoy. So, and then we started making wine jellies out of wine, and it was all these little things that we decided, because the business itself was in dire straits at the time I took it over. Since we were the only commercial winery, we didn't have any way to acquaint the people with the products we were producing. So I decided I'd undertake the chore of going to the legislature, which is an education if you've never been before the legislature, to get a license to serve wine on our premises to the public. Well, we got that through. There was no problem at all, although the industry was relatively unknown. And then I decided there was no advantage. I didn't do that the same year. I had to go back 2 years later. But I decided there was no advantage letting them taste it. If they couldn't buy some on the way out, they'd probably forget what they tasted. So I went back to the legislature and got that done. We invited the legislators to I remember it cost me $500, and that was a lot of money back then, particularly when you took over a company that was in trouble. So we got that through, and it did make the business really grow.
Well, I must say that I think that the Oregon wine industry owes you a debt of thanks for your perseverance and for opening these doors, because if it hadn't been for you, it could have been years later before that would have occurred.
It probably would have been, but, eventually it would have come to reality. But
I think that, Mary, you're a visionary. I think you always were and you always will be.
I was different. Well, the wines we were producing at that time were like Loganberry, Blackberry, and Currant was one of our, Loganberry was our biggest seller and Blackberry second, and Currant was another big item, which we sold more of out of state. Don't ask me why, it was just that was more acceptable then.
I understand for a while you were producing over 300,000 gallons of wine a year.
But we had counts in states where liquor control boards where they ordered in large railroad cars. So, and then we had Concord grape, and we produced some boysenberry, and I think we had apple. Let's see which one do we have.
You had Sauterne.
Sauterne. Well, those were not produced here.
Okay.
Because, we could only sell so much berry wines at that time. You had to educate people to enjoy it. So we brought in bulk wines and sold them under our Honeywood label just to give us the volume we needed to keep the business going. So it kind of balanced itself out. And we did a pretty good sized business because we had some of the chain stores that were ordering that type of wine too. So, well, of course I hated to sell, but I had gotten to the point where I decided that I would have to expand. And I didn't know whether I wanted to get involved in that. And when I met Paul, I remember when they called and asked, and they always say everything's for sale if the price is right. So when I met him, I was really impressed with him, and he had 3 other gentlemen with him. And so, are you listening, Paul? He was great. But anyhow, when I walked out the door, I think it was December 31st, 1973. And I tried not to look back. But I still have a lot of, wonderful memories from being in the business.
Mary, what was your favorite part of the wine industry? What did you enjoy the most, do you think?
Well, my favorite thing was to do the tours. Of course, they always call me, Dutch cleanser Mary, because the plant was just immaculate. There was never a drip on the floor that I didn't insist that they mop it up the minute it happened. But I loved to give the tours because I knew so much about the industry, having started when I was so young working for Mr. Wood. I think the wine industry has done it wonderful. I couldn't believe it because years ago I never would have thought that it would grow to the extent it has here. And the quality is, they're so conscious of that here. So, but they're all unique in their own way, but I'm happy for all of them.
This raspberry is much like the raspberry that was made back in Honeywood's time, back in the 50s and 60s. However, it's much drier. Our winemaker, Marlene, makes the wine much lighter and less sweet than they used to. They used to be finished at about 10% sugar. These are closer to 3%.
Well, it's just like walking out there in the wild raspberries. Mm-hmm. This has a wonderful, wonderful aroma.
Yeah, we try to capture exactly the way the berry is, the raspberry flavor.
I think you did, Marlene. I know every time I go to a wine event that Honeywood is winning many awards. And which is this one of your most popular, or is Blackberry popular? Or?
Blackberry, raspberry, and the Loganberry, that's taken several awards too.
How many different varietals and different berry wines do you make?
Oh,
Start counting.
Yeah, we've been expanding. Yeah.
28, we think.
Really?
28 wines. But
28 wines.
Out of those, how many are fruit wines and how many are varietals?
Oh gosh. Well, it's almost equally distributed amongst the three categories of wines, the varietals, the specialty wines, and the fruit wines.
Now, when you say specialty wines, I think of fruit wines like red currant, pear, boysenberry, but the specialty wines would be Grand Cranberry and Grand Pomegranate. They're all grand wines, evidently.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Well, what's the difference between a fruit wine and a specialty wine?
Well, the fruit wines are all fermented fruit. For instance, blackberry, raspberry, Loganberry, about 7 pounds of fruit per gallon. So it's a real premium style, and that's what you're enjoying now. The specialty wines are, the base wine is Riesling, And we use the Riesling because it has a fruity character and accepts other fruit. And at the last stage of fermentation, just as it's settling out, we add peach or cranberry or whichever wine we're doing. And they blend so well together, and that's why you get a much stronger nose from, say, the peach wine than even if it were 100% peach. And it really works in a marvelous way.
Marlene, there's not a lot of women in the Oregon wine industry making wine. How long have you been doing this?
Oh, I first started probably in the early 80s and just working with the winemaker that Honeywood had for numerous years. And then, actually probably just maybe on my own here, probably the last 5 years.
It's amazing, though. Your fruit wines are all great, but you are producing varietal wines competing with some of the best varietal wines in the state on the West Coast. I mean, your Pinot is excellent.
Thank you.
Silver medal winner, the one from the State Fair?
Actually, the bite in Portland.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. And the Marichal Foch, that took a gold medal at the bite. So, yeah, we're real pleased with those.
Absolutely. I would be very pleased because there's over 130 wineries now in the state, and not many people know that Honeywood is the oldest.
That's true. Not me personally, just the winery.
Not you, Paul.
No. You know, I hesitate to mention it, but the grape wines, the varietals, those are fruit too.
Oh, yes.
Yes.
No, they are. Well, but
I mean, it seems like such a stretch to go from fruit wines to varietals, but Marlene has a lot of training in both and is putting a lot of emphasis on the varietal wines now, much more than ever before. And I think her Gewürztraminer is one that is fantastic. And let me get a couple other glasses here.
Thank you.
And it's done in a fruity, floral, light sweet, and spicy style. And it's the way I think Gewürztraminer should be made. And our customers, over the dry style that we made for a long time, have really responded to this. I think the sales are probably 7 to 1 over the old style.
this is more of a traditional style Gewürztraminer.
No,
No,
not traditional.
not traditional. Explain again. It's a little
Well,
drier.
fruity and spicy. Spicy is a characteristic of the grape, of course, but it's very floral, which is unusual. It really is strong with spice and fruit, very fruity and fresh tasting, and it just makes a marvelous wine.
I kind of really fell into the specialty wines with just getting creative with all the blending, but we're really getting strong with the varietal wines too now and doing more varieties that way. And
You enjoy that?
yeah, we're doing a couple unique ones like the Marichal Foch and you know, adding new ones to the line. You know, through the different stages of making the wine, you can change it, you know, drastically. But especially with the specialty wines, there's very much that we feel like we are kind of the chef creating, you know, some new you know, recipe. Yeah.
He'll come up with an idea and tell you, make a wine to fit this name.
Very much. He does that a lot. He creates wonderful ideas on paper and new labels, and then, you know, it's more or less now come up with the wine. Match my label.
So he's the dreamer and you're the visionary that makes it come
Yes.
true.
Yeah, I get to do the physical labeler of it. Yeah.
And it is a lot of physical labor,
Yeah,
isn't
there
it?
is. There's a lot involved. But
I think you have a real gift, Marlene.
thank you.
I think winemakers are like artists. Do you kind of feel that way when you're doing it with it?
Very much, yes. Because there is your own personality coming out into the finished product, and you know, you kind of becomes your own baby, so to speak, as to, you know.
Speaking of babies, you have a new baby
Yes,
in the
I do.
family.
Yes, I'm a grandmother.
And you have a lovely family, and they're all involved in your business here.
Oh yes,
Isn't that nice?
that is. We try to keep them all busy. But
You make all the wine here on your facility.
yes, we do, and it gets to be, you know, a real puzzle because we do so many different wines, and so scheduling them all and bottling, you know, the different ones and making sure we always have them on hand and not running out.
And all Paul does is sit around and play piano, right?
Yes, he does that a lot too.
You know, you're open year-round, aren't you?
Yes, we are.
And during the holidays, you offer something really special, don't you?
That's a very busy time for us because we are, located in Salem, so we are definitely a retail outlet, and we do gift packs. We handle all the Oregon food products, wine, cheese, sausage.
Now, Paul, you also make a mead.
Yes.
Is that correct? And that's like a really ancient type of wine.
Well, it is. It's known as the oldest wine. There's evidence of mead found in China 12,000 years before the birth of Christ. Grape wines came along about 5,000 years after that. So it is known as the oldest wine. It's one that had its heyday back in medieval times when the known world drank mead. It's still used a lot in England, Scotland, Ireland, and quite a bit on the eastern seaboard of our country. Well, the mead, as we talked about, is the oldest known wine. Back in the 10th to the 14th century, it was the wine most consumed throughout the world. Marlene, I think you should read the warning before.
Oh, yes. There is a warning on this wine.
There
Okay.
is?
Well, mead is believed to have powers of fertility and virility.
Really?
Yes.
And also,
Boy, if I knew what that meant, I would be impressed.
the bride and groom at medieval weddings drank mead for one full moon after the wedding, hence the term honeymoon,
Really?
a term
Yes.
that's still used to this day.
And with this wine, it could be a Honeywood honeymoon.
You
Yes.
bet, yeah.
20 days.
Not a
That
bad way
is
to start off a
really-
marriage.
Yeah.
No.
You could do the same with a toast of Gewürztraminer or Pinot Gris every night.
Do I look better?
You look much better.
Good, I feel better.
The virility, it works every time. Well, our corporate motto is quality, service, and price. And we really truly try to give the best price we can to our customer. The people that support us by coming to our tasting room, buying wine, and buying wine at the festivals are people we feel a lot of loyalty to. And so when Marlene wins a prestigious award with a wine, we've never raised the price of that particular Pinot. We just keep it priced as we have and try to give the best deal that we can. We have started a wine club, which is now, about 4,000 members.
Mhm.
And we send out 3 or 4 mailings a year. We give them special deals on cases or 6 bottles or 3 bottles. And many are very supportive of what we do, so we feel an obligation to give them the best we can.
That's wonderful.
What's the name of the wine club?
The Honeywood, very original name, Honeywood Wine Club. Costs nothing to join, you never have to buy anything, but we just wanted people in the club and for these mailings that are truly interested in what we do and what we're about and who we are, that kind of thing.
Great.
Well, you've done a great job here. We're going to look around your shop a little bit, and I think some of those 4,000 people are starting to arrive. So we'll let you go ahead and take care of your customers.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, you bet.
Did you notice that all of their wines had such a spectacular aroma?
Oh, yes. It's what Mary Reinke would call the sweet smell of success.
Chucky wants to be in the party too.
Chucky wants to play. Give Chucky some meat.
Chucky too.
Grandma.
Yeah, what's the matter?
That's like drinking it.
She gave it to me. I don't know.
Oh,
I enjoyed
you're
it.
so beautiful.
Listen to our dog having screaming.
Which of your wines are most similar to what she was selling then?
Well, at that time they sold just the premium fruit wines. And
I have one.
the most popular were Loganberry, Blackberry, and Raspberry.
I'd love to try that.
Marlene's got some raspberry here.
And it's still popular.
Oh, yes.
But we
What
can't
did
get the
you put
cork
that
out.
cork?